Credit card spending is way up. How can you avoid trouble? Well, Ted and I are going to talk about it starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
For the last 3 decades, credit card debt has been going up. Do you believe that?
With some temporary lapses, obviously.
Well, in fact, what we will do right now is put up on the screen a graph, a chart, a table. I don't know what it is. It's got all these squiggly lines. So, and we weren't actually going to record anything today, but I saw this and I thought, hey, we got to talk about that. So that's why we're using paper and not cue cards. So explain what we see in this chart. So this chart goes back to the beginning of 2013.
Which is the beginning of time for most people.
Which is the beginning of time. And as you can see, and we'll put this up on the screen, the amount of Canadian household credit card debt keeps going up and up and up and up. And you're right, there were a couple of blips downward, but it peaked in April of 2020. That's when it
February, September.
It continued to peak. I guess it was just before the pandemic.
Right.
So February of 2020, it was around 88,000. And this is credit card debt. You got to multiply it by 1 million to get the total. So we're talking $88 billion.
It's a big number.
It's a huge number. So December of 2019, it was around 89 billion. Same in January, February, March 2020. And then boom, April of 2020, it collapsed down to 77 billion and remained low for a while, a couple of little upticks. So why is it that in April of 2020, we had this massive drop?
Well, if you remember back to the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was basically putting the world on hold. So there were deferrals for payments for this, for that, for the everything. So, and there was no place to spend your money, even if you wanted to. So suddenly there was no new debt being incurred, and anybody paying down debt, it was going right on the principal and reducing the total.
Yeah, and I think it's as simple as that. There was no place to spend any money. You couldn't go on vacation, stores were closed, couldn't get your hair cut, whatever.
Right.
So I'm not spending as much. But if I was able to work from home, I still had money coming in. Mm-hmm. Or if I started to qualify for CERB or unemployment or whatever, I had money coming in.
Yeah, I mean, what this really suggests is that if there's no new spending, people make payments equivalent to this sort of amount over a 2 or 3 month period.
And pay it right down. So when we go back to the chart, we had this massive drop. And by April of 2020, it was down to about 77 billion. And then there was a little bit of an uptick. But then, interestingly enough, the real bottom was hit in February of 2021 at about 73 billion in household credit card debt across Canada. So why would we have that kind of two-step thing? Why would it collapse, start to come back up, and then drop again? Is it as simple as, well, the economy is sort of opening and closing, but also there's seasonality to credit cards?
Well, I mean, I think the opening and closing is more likely because you see where it went up again was the summer months when people were able to get outside. So we were getting in groups again. There were more activities you could spend your money on. And then we get back into the winter where you're locked inside and it caves again.
Yeah. And so you have to look at averages as opposed to 1 month. I mean, credit cards tend to increase in December.
Makes sense.
And they tend to fall, I get my tax refund in March or April, I start to pay them down.
And again, what I was alluding to before was in a typical month, the amount of money spent on credit cards is slightly larger than the amount of money that's repaid. And so all this is showing you is the months that, okay, people are able to spend money again.
Yep. Or they weren't, and as a result, they were able to pay things down.
That's right.
Now, the reason I wanted to record this podcast is because, again, back to the chart, you can see that in September 2022, which is the most recent data we have as we're recording this, the balance owing on all credit cards went up to $89.9 billion.
You want to say this. It's off the chart.
It's off the chart, baby. Well, I actually adjusted the schedule, so it wasn't off the chart.
Right.
But that $89.9 billion is higher than the $89.6 billion we had in December of 2019, just before the pandemic.
Well, and folks, that's an all-time high.
That
obviously,
is an all-time high.
because you can see the chart.
There you go. And, well, in fact, if you go back to November of 1990, which is not on this chart, Canadian households owed $9.8 billion in credit cards. Now we owe almost $90 billion.
10 times.
So almost a 10 times increase over a 30-year period.
It's like buying Tesla stock before Elon went crazy.
That's right. So, well, and by the time this show airs, maybe he's become normal again.
We'll edit it out, I know.
Yeah, we'll edit it out. So now you had predicted, I believe. Tell me what you would predict.
I believe in our year-end prediction show last year, I predicted that by Christmas of this year, we'd be back with the same levels of credit card debt. And apparently I was wrong.
You were wrong. It was earlier than
higher.
that. Earlier than that. And we're not going to get into a whole lot of detail because, of course, at the end of the year, we are going to do our year-end prediction show, which comes up in a couple of weeks. So we will go into a lot more detail on that. But the interesting thing is that, yes, there was a big drop in credit card balances, and then we've come all the way back and then some.
The irony of all of this is when the savings rates were going crazy at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody thought that there'd been a new paradigm. People have learned their lesson that it's changed. People didn't learn anything. We're right back where we started.
Yeah, and as we record this, and we recorded a couple weeks before it actually airs, we do not yet have the most up-to-date savings numbers.
Right, so I guess I'm making a prediction. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Save it for the year-end show.
And we will have it on the year-end show, so again, everyone will want to tune in for that. But what the savings chart looks like is sort of similar to what this chart looks like. Our savings, except in inverse. So our savings were going down, 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 down. They were practically zero when the pandemic started. And then, boom, up they went to, again, record high, multi-decade highs.
Right.
But then they have been eroding since then. So why then is it, you've explained over the last couple of years what happened to credit card debt. Why is it that credit card debt has been increasing for 30 years? That's not a pandemic thing. What are some of the factors that have caused that?
Well, we should probably get a chart sometime and show them 30 years of inflation. So what did a cup of coffee cost you in, what would that be, 1992 versus what's a cup of coffee cost you today? In 1992, I don't remember there being a Starbucks every 17 feet. Maybe there was. I don't drink coffee.
No,
so.
You'd be too wired if you did. I think we had Tim Hortons back then. So
certainly.
Well, the cost of producing a coffee bean, I believe, is something like 30 times less than it was back then.
Really?
But you are correct. When I go into the coffee shop, the cost of buying it is that much higher. So clearly we've had, and certainly in 2022, we've had lots of inflation. So what does that have to do with credit card balances?
Well, so if the cost of living is increasing, your salary never increases as fast as the cost of living, you've got to finance that difference someplace. I think the biggest reason credit card debt goes up is because the marketing guys are so good at their jobs. They tell you that, well, this is the payment as opposed to this is the cost, and so you buy the damn thing.
Well, and with credit cards, you get the rewards.
Oh, that's true.
And so
but that's another marketing thing, right?
Yeah, that's exactly a marketing thing.
It just influences your purchases.
So, and you and I have done a few shows on that in the recent past. If I know that I'm going to get my, travel miles or my cash back or my, I don't know what all
whatever
the different things are.
Yep.
But it's like, well, I could just pay with my debit card, but I don't get that thing, so I'm going to put it on my credit card. So I do get that thing, and it really doesn't cost me any extra because the thing is free. And we did do the show about the credit card fees, which as we're recording this now, I'm not aware of any retailers that have put that fee on explicitly.
Yeah, and the folks to watch were obviously the telecoms, right? Because they were the ones pushing for it.
Well, it was TELUS in particular who said, if you're going to pay by credit card, then we're going to add that fee. And I don't know if they have or they haven't, but I guess I'll either pay by debit or switch to one of the others that doesn't.
Right.
So, and you made the point on that show that what people have done, what business have been doing for the last 30 years, they just bury the cost in what they're selling anyways.
Yeah, we're all paying the cost.
We're all paying for it anyway.
That's
so
right.
if the merchant fee is 2%, well, prices are 2% higher.
Right.
And even if they did start adding it, I think you had made the prediction they wouldn't be lowering their prices by 2%. So, okay, so why is credit card balances gone up? So one of them is the higher cost of living.
Yep. Well, and the other is it's just easier to get access to credit cards. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that every day in the mail you knew you were going to get a credit card application. Pre-approved for a gold card, a platinum card, a crystal card.
Molybdenum.
There you go. Oh, that's a good word.
I don't even know what that means. But
molybdenum?
Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, it's just been that much easier to get.
Yeah. I'm not sure that that's accurate anymore. I seem to recall before the pandemic, they were at least gearing back a little bit on that. I don't remember receiving as many in the mail, but...
Yeah, that would be my anecdotal evidence as well. And I think the lenders can see what's coming.
Right.
So it is almost universally accepted that if we aren't in a recession now, here at the end of 2022, then we will certainly be in one by 2023.
Very quickly.
And, I believe the prediction I will be making on our year-end prediction show is that they will declare the recession in March of 2023. And of course,
declare it ended in April, and we'll still be suffering from it the following year.
They declare it long after it's ended.
Right.
Well, sorry, long after it's actually begun.
Because information is historic, right?
Well, it takes time. And again, I won't get into it now because we can talk about it on the year-end show. But the point is then, okay, so we got a higher cost of living. Everyone gets that.
Right.
And there is more access to credit products.
More available.
And okay, I guess the point I was making is that if we are heading into a recession, banks may be pulling back a little bit and going, okay, you know what? You've got to have a credit score this high in order to get the free offer, not just this high.
Right.
So we may see a bit of a moderation in that. But, it is what it is. And of course, 30 years ago, could you use a credit card at a grocery store?
Probably not.
It certainly is not my recollection. So I think you can use them everywhere now.
Yep. And in fact, thanks to the pandemic, you're encouraged to use plastic instead of cash.
Yep. Well, and there is an advantage of just going tap rather than reaching into your pocket and getting the cash and all the rest of it.
Only if you remember not to spend the cash on something else.
So long as so long as you're able to pay it. So, okay, so that kind of explains why credit card debt has gone up over the last 30 years with a few little hiccups. And so I assume on our year-end prediction show, you will predict that it will continue to increase.
That would be a safe bet.
That's likely what you will be predicting. And even if we head into a recession, really all that means is the rate of increase is slower?
Well, that's right. I mean, so we roll into a recession, people will be incurring less new charges on their credit card. But they'll be making even smaller payments. So right now there's a differential. That's why it keeps going up. The differential's still going to be there.
Yeah, and you made the point that with inflation, wages never keep up to inflation.
They always lag.
And that's the whole point of inflation.
Right.
It's a way to take money from the lower income people and the middle income people and give it to the higher income people. Because who are the people who benefit from inflation? Well, anybody who owns assets, a house, stocks, all those things went up during the pandemic. So now I'm not saying some conspiracy theory here. That's inflation is created specifically for that purpose. But that's quite clearly the result. Right. There's no way to do it. So again, if inflation is going up faster than wages, how do I make up the gap? You already said it. I'm putting it on my credit card.
Right.
Simple as that. Okay, so we are both licensed insolvency trustees.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find it troubling when credit card levels continue to go up? Or is it like, oh, well, that's just the way it is? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, effectively, it means that regardless of how much the banks and other financial institutions say they're involved in financial literacy, people still don't get it. I mean, if you take a moment and you say, I want to buy this item, but I'm going to put it on my credit card, and you realize you can't pay the balance off at the end of the month, then you have to add the interest charges from the credit card to the cost of purchasing that item. And nobody ever does that because it's too complicated.
Well, and a bank would not have any incentive to teach you that.
Oh, no financial house does, right?
And a merchant would not have any incentive to teach you that.
That's right. They all market that this is the payment. You can afford the payment.
And I believe we've done the math on previous shows. If I buy something for $1,000 and the interest rate is 20% on the credit card, and I'm gonna carry a balance for 5 years until I pay it off, then I don't know. I'm probably paying close to double what the thing cost.
And that's how mortgages work,
and car loans and a lot of other things. So debt is just built into our system then.
It is. It's built into our consumer culture. In fact, if we had everybody stop using credit tomorrow, the recession would be horrendous. I mean, it would be depression. It wouldn't be a recession.
Well, it would completely crash. I mean, the chart we showed that Canadians have $90 billion owing on credit cards.
Yep.
And that's not mortgages, lines of credit, personal loans. That's just credit cards.
Right. And if you consider that credit cards are probably used for intangibles more than tangibles. So it's not like you use your credit card every week and go out and buy a washer dryer, but you do put gas in the car. You pick up a pizza on the way home to the kids. All of these things you got nothing to show for it once the money's been spent. except for maybe my waistline.
There you go, yeah. We'll edit that out too.
Whereas lines of credit and loans, at least you usually use them to buy something. So that you can something tangible.
Yeah, and we can debate about whether a mortgage is a good thing or a bad thing, but there's no doubt you do have a thing.
Right.
You got a house.
Yep.
Whereas with a
tank of gas, you got a tank of gas.
Then it's gone. So does it trouble you that credit card levels have continued to increase then?
Well, if I was in another line of business, it would trouble me. But this is, it bodes well for us. We're going to get stupid busy in the spring.
Yeah, it is what it is. So, okay, let's take the other side of it then and give some practical advice then. If you are talking to a family member or a friend or something,
anybody,
and saying, okay, it would be a good idea to have less credit card debt as opposed to more.
Right.
Okay, that's easy for you to say,
but
how do you do it?
The first question you ask yourself then is, how many credit cards do you actually have? If you don't have a credit card, you can't use it. So if you look in your wallet right now and you find out you got 3 Visa cards, 2 MasterCards, and an American Express card, I would say to you that that's probably 4 credit cards more than you should have. Arguably, it's 5 more than you should have.
What's the right number?
1, maybe 2. 1, because you're supposed to be using a credit card as a replacement for cash, not a replacement for borrowing. So that means you're at the supermarket. I could take the cash out of my pocket, or I could charge it and put the cash in the bank and pay off the credit card. You don't do both. So that's option number 1. So find out how many credit cards you have in your wallet and then eliminate the ones you really don't need.
Yeah.
Now, it's a problem if you already have balances on them.
Right. But I agree with that mindset.
Yep.
If I am, in your example, going to buy a washer and a dryer, I am not going to carry wads of $20 bills to the department store.
Right.
Because I might lose them. I might get mugged. I don't know what's going to happen. Whereas with the credit card, really easy. Boom, here's your money. And then I can go home and just transfer the money from my bank account to my credit card.
And if you need to borrow for something like a washer dryer, credit card's not the way to do it anyway, because it's 20% interest. Probably, the furniture store will give you 2 years to pay on some kind of plan. So
yeah, or go talk to your bank about a line of credit or some kind of loan or something. So yes, you don't want to be using it as a way to borrow. So I understand why one credit card makes sense, because it's a substitute for cash.
Convenience item.
And why would I possibly have 2 instead of 1?
So second one, if you're in any way involved in business, so you get expenses reimbursed by your employer, but you got to pay them first, or if you got a small business on the side, what do they call them now? Side hustles, any of that sort of stuff. If you have a separate card for those transactions, it's easier to keep track of them. So it's easier to prove it to Revenue Canada if they ever ask for it. And also you can directly, okay, so this is what I need to get back from my expense report from work, or this is what I'm deducting for taxes in the business. It's just cleaner.
Gotcha. So that would be why you would have 2. I guess the other reason I would say you might have 2 instead of 1 is I don't want to be beholden to just one bank.
Right.
Because if they have some, internet outage or something, and, all of their credit cards are linked into that cell phone company that we won't mention their name, but it was Rogers. And so you couldn't make payments at any of those institutions or use those cards, but the other ones were on a different network you could. So that might be another reason. Okay, I got a backup card for just that reason.
Yep.
I guess the other game people play is the rewards game.
Right.
So this card, I get X% back on groceries, but this one I get X% back on gas for my car. So this is the one I use for groceries. This is the one I use for my car.
Right.
And maybe this is the one I use for other spending and my Netflix and whatever. So I could see having 3 or 4 different cards. And if I'm maximizing my rewards by doing that, is there a problem with that?
Not as long as you're paying off the balance. The risk with having multiple credit cards is at some point you start to run up a balance that you can't pay off at the end of the month. So if you don't have access to that credit, you can't spend the money. So if you have 6 credit cards in your wallet and they're all a $5,000 limit, that means you can get $30,000 worth of credit card debt, probably at 19% interest. If you have 2 credit cards in your wallet, the most you can get exposed to is $10,000.
Yeah, so if you are highly disciplined, okay, then, great. And I guess if I did have a card that I used to buy groceries, because I got the grocery reward on that one, that would probably be a good card then to have a limit on it of $1,000 or $2,000 or something, not 10, because it's unlikely I'm going to spend $10,000 on groceries. So, and it's unlikely you're going to go into a grocery store and spend $1,000. So that would be a whole lot of really valuable steaks or something.
It's
I guess
a lot of something.
Would be hard. Now, of course,
These days it would be lettuce.
Right, exactly. With inflation, it may not be as big a thing. But okay, I get the rewards. I go home. I transfer the money. I can get by with a $500 limit on that card.
Right.
So that's the big risk to credit cards right there.
It's access to credit that you may at some point inadvertently use.
So we're doing the practical advice segment here. So the first practical advice you had is you should limit the number of credit cards you have.
Right.
1 is okay, 2 maybe, and maybe there's a valid reason to have 3 or 4, but 15 seems excessive. So we're not going to tell you what the magic number is. You got to figure that out for yourself. We just like low more than high.
Right.
Okay, continue on then. So what are the other practical things? Well, I guess you already said it. You never want to carry a balance.
You don't. I mean, and if you have to carry a balance, make sure it's on whichever card has the lowest interest rate. Most people don't actually know what interest is being charged on their credit cards, which is kind of strange because a couple of years ago, the government mandated that they have to show you your interest costs and how long it'll take you to pay the card off if you make nothing but the minimum payment. So it's all there in black and white, but you don't have to look at it.
Well, and here's a question for our viewer or our listener.
One viewer?
Well, you want to talk to the person. That's what they teach in podcast
That whole sponsor
school.
thing didn't work.
No, it didn't. We've got
no money came
for
in?
anybody's wondering, not one single bank has called me to sponsor our show. So now, of course, I've completely lost my train of thought here. I know. Remember what it was. So the person who's watching us today, you made the comment that people aren't really sure what interest they're paying.
Right.
How many people do you know how the interest is calculated? So
it depends.
It depends.
Tell us how it's calculated on a cash advance.
Well, it's instant.
Correct. Tell us how it's calculated on a purchase. It depends.
It depends. So most cards, pretty much all cards, have a grace period.
Right.
So you buy something and you're not going to start being charged interest for a certain period of time. Do you understand for the card you have how that grace period works?
Well, yeah. Do you know when it is?
Do you know when it is? So is it 21 days? Yeah. Is it 21 days from the statement date? How does it work?
The simple thing to understand is that it's definitely going to be, if you miss a payment, interest is charged from that day going forward.
There's no doubt about that.
That's the easiest way to understand
That's locked in.
Yep.
And so you want to fully understand exactly how that works, because you don't want to be sitting there thinking, oh, okay, well, I've got till the 30th of next month to pay it.
Right.
No, I don't know of any credit card that works on a calendar month.
Not anymore. They're
all working on some other system. So you definitely want to understand that so that you're not only not carrying a balance, but not paying anything and not paying any interest. The advice I give everyone, I don't know if anyone follows it, but for years I've been saying, pay your credit card off in full more frequently than once a month.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can never get behind then.
Right.
So you mentioned about using credit cards for business. You and I both have credit cards that we use for this business, and we put lots of stuff on it because we're buying supplies.
Lots of stuff.
And whatnot. My credit card that I use for that does not have a sufficient authorized limit to pay for stuff for a whole month.
Right.
And that's deliberate. I don't need a $10 million limit on the card. So what I do once a week is I log in, see how much is owing, and I pay it.
Right.
Gone. Boom. Done.
And I do it every 2 weeks when we get paid.
There you go. So we both have a system.
Same system. Yep.
So now that helps in many ways. Number one, we're never paying interest.
Right.
Number two, we're never late with our payment because we're always early. And it also serves to juice our credit score up.
Who does it?
Well, because our utilization is lower.
Oh, gotcha.
So utilization is, I've got this much, I got a $10,000 authorized limit. If I never go above $2,000 throughout the month, well, I've never got anything higher than a 20% utilization. And by paying it every 2 weeks, every week, whatever, you're keeping it lower. Now, we don't do it to make our credit score as high as we want.
Yeah, we've done credit score shows. I think that whole thing is people have bought into that the wrong way.
And so I don't think you should have 12 credit cards so that you can have the highest credit score.
Interesting philosophy.
Well, and it may increase, it does increase your borrowing ability.
Right.
And therefore lowers your utilization if you're not carrying balances on all of them. But of course, at some point it gets too high and it starts to harm your credit score.
Right.
So my practical advice is I'm a big believer in paying your credit card frequently, because then you can't get into any trouble. It's as simple as that.
If the cash is out of your bank account, you can't spend it on something else.
Yep.
Remember what we told you. Credit is a replacement for cash. It's not a replacement for borrowing.
So I guess from a safety point of view, what you want is a low authorized limit.
Yep.
So if the bank says, "Hey, congratulations, we're gonna raise you from 5,000 to 10,000," you could say, "Thanks, bank. You know what? I'm happy at the 5."
Right.
And I realize that's not going to help you maximize your credit score because now you're going to have lower utilization, but it also prevents you from spending more than what you realistically want to do. So, okay, any other practical advice that you would like to give people? I kind of stopped you in the middle there. Yeah. So
it's almost impossible to live in our culture without a credit card. I mean, now most of the debit cards you have for the bank actually have credit card numbers on them so you can use them the same way. You have to have one. I'm sorry, that's just the way it works. And if you are ever going to need borrowing of any other type for a car or a line of credit or a personal loan, a mortgage, you need some kind of credit history. So you actually need a credit card just so you can establish that you responsibly use credit so you don't get screwed when you go out to borrow for these bigger things.
Well, and it's not just borrowing. If you want to rent an apartment,
I haven't done that in a long time.
There you go.
I believe you.
A landlord will want to run a credit check on you.
Right.
And if you say, "Hey, I'm Warren Buffett. I haven't had a credit card in 50 years. I got $1 billion in the bank. I pay cash for everything."
Yep.
They go, "Yeah, sorry, but you don't have a credit history, so we're not going to rent you this apartment." Okay. In some provinces, not Ontario, but on the East Coast, your car insurance can be, the cost can be based somewhat on your...
Which is interesting.
And probably unethical and illegal, but hey,
right.
that's the way it works out there. So yeah, I totally agree with you. We live in a culture where credit that's just a thing.
You got to have it.
And so, okay, it's a necessary evil. It's kind of like, I got to wear a pair of shoes. It's the winter. I can't go around barefoot, even though it's much more comfortable.
It's like I keep a jar of chocolate-covered almonds on the desk and then wonder why my weight goes up.
There you go. So we're not opposed to chocolate-covered almonds. In fact, I'm a big supporter of them.
That's right.
As a matter of fact. But yeah, in moderation, obviously, is what you got to do.
Is the key.
That is the key. But you're right about the debit cards.
Right.
So people say, "Well, I got to pay for my Netflix subscription somehow, and I don't want to be carrying cash around." Well, a debit card does that. And You're right. If you've got a Visa debit card, then it's going to work pretty much everywhere Visa works, including online. So you don't have to have access to credit to conduct most forms of business.
Right. And
I guess what we're really saying is you got to have a plan here.
Oh, and you got to be careful. So my plan is, I realize that a credit card is kind of like fire. Mm-hmm. If I use it wrong, I'm going to get burned. But fire's nice when I'm cooking my hamburgers. So my plan is, I'm going to have one card. I'm going to pay it off every 2 weeks when I get paid. Yep.
But that way it will at least establish some credit history so that when I need to rent an apartment or transact some other business, I've got something there. But I'm going to deliberately keep the authorized limit as low as I can. I'm going to pay it off. I got a plan.
Right.
And maybe I do have 3 different cards so I can play the rewards game. Okay, maybe you better make a note of what your plan is here.
Right.
I use this one here and I use that one there, but at least you've got a plan. So
that's right.
Any final comments on credit cards, pro, con, practical, impractical, anything?
Again, if you limit your access to the number of cards and the amount of money you can spend on the cards, you can't get in trouble.
And it's pretty much as simple as that. Well, easy to say,
hard to do.
And look, we understand because we talk to people all day long. Everything was going great, and then my car broke down.
Right. Something happens. And so, I need my car to get to work, so I got to put it on my credit card. Okay, we get it. And okay, in hindsight, it's like, well, I guess I should have tried to build up an emergency fund. But that's pretty hard to do when my costs are going up faster than my wages and I'm living paycheck to paycheck as it is. Right.
But okay, great. If you can anticipate that, fantastic. But if you are in that situation, I guess it's as simple as, well, get it paid off as quick as you can.
That's right. Well, prioritize, right? Okay, so I've had this unfortunate expense, the transmission in the car. I now realize for the next 3 or 4 months, I got to adjust the way I spend my money because I got this damn bill I got to pay.
Yep. And when you say prioritize, if you got 2 credit cards and one's got a higher interest rate, that's the one I'd be whacking more money against.
Right. Well, I was referring more like, well, okay, maybe I can't have pizza 2 days this week. I got to cut it back to 1.
Yep.
Because I got to free up some money to pay this transmission
and
cost.
I've just got to do what I can do. And again, easy to say, harder to do, but at least if you got a plan, you can focus on it. So there you go, credit cards. And again, we showed the chart earlier. The number keeps going up. Ted has predicted that it will continue to go up. So we will, I believe it's our last show of December, will be our year-end prediction show.
So, folks, you can now predict what we're going to predict.
That's right.
Ooh.
So, yes, exactly. You can have your bingo card out. How many times is Ted going to say credit cards are going to keep peaking? Will Ted mention the word payday loans and how many? We should actually publish the bingo card. That
would be fun, actually.
For people watching around. And our predictions last year were not exactly bang on accurate.
Most of them were wrong.
Mine, some of them were completely and totally wrong. But what we're going to do is go through what we predicted and why, and then give you the thought process for this year. So you can play the home game for yourself.
There you go.
That will be last show of the year. Until then, that is our show for today. That is Debt Free in 30. Thanks for listening and watching. Please subscribe to the audio versions, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever you listen to it on. If you're on YouTube, you know how to do it. Click all the buttons so that the Google algorithm thinks this is the greatest show ever. And you can subscribe and get the notification for every new show that comes out every Saturday morning. That is our show for today. That is Debt Free in 30. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.